Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the second of our French Entree webinars on buying property in France. We are delighted to have so many of you here with us this morning. I'm just seeing the numbers tick up as I get started. So whether you're watching this live this morning or whether you're watching it on a replay, which we'll send round, we're delighted to have you here with us this morning to listen to presentations from three of our experts and to also answer your questions. In terms of the content today, a lot of the content will be universal. It will apply regardless of your nationality or whereabouts you live in the world, but obviously we have decided to give this session a particular spin by looking at buying before Brexit. So we know that a lot of the attendees that are watching this morning are from the UK, are British looking to buy in France before the end of the transition period. So a lot of it will be universal and relevant to all, but certainly when we come to the Q&A sessions, a lot of the content will principally be aimed at British buyers looking in France and just looking at those questions and concerns that you might have through the lens of Brexit. It's going to be a fast and furious 60 minutes. We've allowed 60 minutes for this session. If we need to, we can run over slightly, but obviously conscious of everyone's time. So it'll be fast and furious. Please feel free to take notes, but just to reiterate that this session will be recorded and we will send it out to you shortly after the session finishes. By way of introduction, my name is Alistair Lockhart. I'm the Property Director for FrenchEntrée. I'm going to be your host for this morning's action-packed session. I personally lived in France for 6 years. I lived on the border between the Charente and the Dordogne, for those of you who know that part of the forest. Both of my children were born in France, and I was the MD of a national estate agency. So we were selling hundreds of properties every year to international buyers. So you can say that I've been there, done that, and got the t-shirt. So hopefully we can bring some of that experience and knowledge to bear both this morning and also in our future exchanges. FrenchEntrée, many of you will be subscribers to our magazine, or you will read our newsletters that go out regularly. So you will be aware of us, but if not, we've been the leading resource for French property buyers since 2003. We do that through a network of partners on the ground in France. So real estate agents, mortgage providers, currency experts, architects, surveyors, removal firms, wealth planners, accountants, you name it. We are the Swiss Army knife for buying a property in France. So in theory, any problem you've got, anything that you want to try and achieve in France, we should be able to point you in the right direction. FrenchEntrée is part of the France Media Group, which is a specialist publisher of digital living, gastronomy, travel and tourism. So we're deep specialists in France. We love France, and hopefully we can bring some of that knowledge and experience to bear. Just by way of kicking off, I just wanted to make the point that France is very much open for business. I know that it's a very strange time. You'll see that Jane has got her mask around her. Jane's the only one of the four of us at the moment who's in France. And we all have to adapt to a different way of living and working at the moment. But in terms of what's happening on the ground in France, it's very, very busy. There's definitely a confluence of events between the pent-up demand during lockdown for 3 or 4 months, has met with the increased demand from British buyers looking to settle in France before the end of the year. And those two events mean that the market is exceptionally busy. Properties are going much, much faster than usual, and all of our partners are very, very busy. One of the key questions that we get asked, which Jane will touch on later on, is it safe to go? Can I get to France? Can I get back? Obviously, I can talk from the perspective of somebody who's in the UK. I went over to Normandy last week after 4 months of lockdown with my 2 teenage kids. We needed a change of scenery, so we went to Normandy for a week. I went to the in-laws, and I have to say, it was a fairly straightforward experience. We went over on the Eurotunnel. The only difference was that we weren't allowed to get out of the car, but why would you? Because it's a very dull metal box under the sea. And we came out the other end. Moving around France was fine. We wore our masks when we went to the supermarket. And coming back into the UK was equally fine. There was normal service at passport control. The only slight difference was that we had to fill out an electronic visa before we came back in. which the chap at the passport control asked us if we'd done it, but didn't ask to see it. So I thought that was important to make that point, that although there is a lot going on and there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of unknowns and a lot of unknown unknowns, having been there and done that last week, it's a very straightforward and relatively stress-free experience. So obviously one can't allow for future localized lockdowns, important to make that caveat, but there's really no reason not to get over to France and start looking at some properties. In terms of housekeeping and how this morning's session is going to run, as I say, the recording will be sent out to all registered attendees, so you can watch this back at your leisure if you miss anything. It hopefully isn't going to feel like a lecture series where you just get spoken at for an hour. We want to make it as interactive as possible. So there'll be a couple of polls that pop up throughout the next hour. If we can get your input into those, that would be great. I don't have any countdown music to accompany them, but we'll have about 30 seconds to answer those polls. And critically, there's a Q&A function. So this is an opportunity for you to ask your questions to our panel. So there's a Q&A box. If you're not familiar with Zoom, which is the platform we're using, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your window there. Please use the Q&A button to ask your questions. If you use the chat function, I can't guarantee that we'll see it because there's only so many places your eyes can look at when you're doing this sort of thing. So please use the Q&A function. And what we'll do is we'll put those questions to our panel throughout the morning, and we'll try and wrap up as many as we can at the end of the session. Obviously, a lot of the questions that will get asked will be about some subject matters that our panelists are not necessarily qualified or feel comfortable to answer. So we're delighted that the British Embassy in Paris, who are one of our partners, have agreed to support this webinar this morning. We work with them with regard to their media and communications. And so they very kindly agreed to pick up any question that we aren't able to answer this morning, whether it be about immigration or residency or carte de séjour or healthcare. We'll put those questions to the British Embassy and then we'll come back to you. That may not be on an individual basis, but we'll certainly come back to you via email and we'll be putting content up on the website. It is also worth pointing out the British Embassy are very active in this area. So if you have got questions and concerns, and you haven't done it already, it's worth going over to their Facebook page because they do live Q&As every week. So it's eminently possible that the thing that is concerning you has already been asked by somebody and answered. So it's worth spending a bit of time just going through the previous questions and answers. We are delighted to be joined this morning by three experts, heavyweights, if you will, of the French property market, who have very kindly agreed to give up their time this morning. We're all very busy, so we're very grateful for their time. So this morning we're going to hear from Mar Bonnier-Palmer of Moneycorp, the foreign exchange specialist. Thank you, Mar. Excellent wave. And we've been working with Moneycorp for over 10 years, and Mar is going to talk you through a really important part of the process, which is how to make sure you get the most euros when you are exchanging your money, and also how to protect yourself against the currency fluctuations, which could potentially save you thousands of euros. So that's Mar. Following Mar will be Simon Conn. Simon is an overseas mortgage specialist, a veteran, if you will, of the French mortgage market with over 30 years experience. I've known Simon for 15 years. Simon will talk to us about how mortgages are working at the moment in the context of COVID and Brexit. And then last but not least, we have the lovely Jane Tom from Agence Tom in Northwest France. Jane is one of our property partners who covers a lovely part of Northwest France. And Jane's going to be talking to us about the property market, how it will work in the context of Brexit if you are a British buyer looking to complete within the next 6 months or so, how to buy and sell property safely in a COVID environment, and lastly to talk a little bit about her area and what money can buy you in her part of the world. So without any further ado, that's more than enough from me. I would like to introduce you to Mar for the first session. Over to you, Mar.
Good morning and thank you for having me. My name is Mar, and as Alistair said, I work for a company called Moneycorp. Moneycorp is a foreign exchange specialist, and what we do is we help individuals changing their currency into another currency for an international payment. And this is why I'm here today, hopefully to give you some tips and some information about the best way to exchange your funds. So to do so, I'm going to talk a little bit about exchange rates and the impact that the fluctuations can have on your property purchase. I'm going to then cover a couple of tips to help you plan how to exchange the funds in the best way possible. And of course, I'm going to finish talking a little bit about an update on what is happening right now with the markets, with COVID and with Brexit, and what is the forecast for those who are looking to make a payment either in a short term or planning something long term. So you are buying in France and you will have to pay for your property in euros, and most of you are holding a different currency, mainly British pounds, but some of you may be holding US dollars or Australian dollars. At some point, you will need to exchange your funds into euros to pay for the deposit and finally to complete on your property purchase. And how you do that, at the rate that you do that, will define and determine completely the price that you are paying for that property. Therefore, exchange rates are a key element of your property purchase and need to be taken into account. However, they are often, as much as is important, forgotten or left for the very last minute. We often actually said that foreign exchange is the hidden cost of an overseas property purchase, and I'm here to make sure that you incorporate this element. One of the main challenges that we have when we're looking at exchange rates is the fact that the rates are constantly in the move, and sometimes they move quite fast, and the movement can be quite drastic in a very short term, and sometimes even quite unpredicted, especially on those days. Just to have a bit of an example of how these fluctuations can impact your property purchase, I'm going to share something with you and put you an example. I'm going to put the example of Mr. and Mrs. Jones, who are dreaming of buying a property in France, and with this intention, they travel to France in February to find the property. And they find the property in Normandy to buy with a price tag of 250,000 euros. They put an offer in, the offer is accepted, and they go back to the UK, having completed that first step of owning a property in France. Once back in the UK, they do their calculations, they look at their budget, and they see that the property at the time is going to cost them £208,000. The rate at the time is 120, as you can see in the chart, that is reflecting the pound against the euro for the last 6 months to a year. Now, a couple of weeks later, they are being given the compromis de vente, who is a reservation, that is a reservation contract. They check everything, and after the cooling period, they are asked to pay the 10% deposit. At the time, they don't think about it twice. They do it through their bank. They send the 10% deposit. If they would have looked at the market by then, they would have think that due to the COVID, the pound had started to go down quite drastically against the euro. At the time of paying the deposit, actually the rate was 105. And finally, a couple of months later, with a slight delay due to lockdown, they're asked to complete on the property purchase. And they realize that by then, the rate has dropped to 112, which is quite different than that 120 that they have initially. And suddenly the property is going to cost them £15,000 more than what they initially planned for. So this is the cost and the risk of foreign exchange. The fact that by the time you find the property, to the time that you complete, the rates may have moved so much that you can no longer afford that property, or it has become very expensive indeed. So if the rates are constantly in the move, what can you do in order to protect your purchase price from that negative fluctuations and make sure that your price is actually not affected by them? I'm going to give you a couple of tips that hopefully help you, not only with foreign exchange, but also with the whole process. And my first tip is to set up a budget. To set up a budget will not only help you to identify what you can afford and what property you're looking to buy, but also by incorporating the foreign exchange element into your budget will hopefully help you to achieve a good rate of exchange. Now, foreign exchange is a world of regrets because it's very difficult to decide when you have to press that button and see that the rate is good enough for you to exchange your funds. Mainly because after you have decided to exchange your funds, the rate will continue moving. So people always has this regret, is that a good time? Will the rate move more positively once I have a change it? Will it drop? Now, I always say to my clients that in order to avoid regrets, the best thing is to have a range in mind that works with your budget and with your circumstances. Right now, the rate is about 110. So let's say that I found the property to buy and I said 110 is well within my budget, but ideally I would like to exchange my funds at a higher rate. So I say my ideal rate will be 113. That's quite realistic. We could go there. We have some positive news. However, I know I cannot afford below 1. So that's going to be my bottom line that I'm going to look and make sure that the rate doesn't move below that level. So this is my range. I have a range. My bottom is 1. My top rate is 113. If I trade within this range, it should be well within my budget. The closer I get to 113, the happier am I because I get more money for my pounds, but knowing that I'm not going to have any nasty surprise at the end. My second advice is, or my second tip is quite obvious. Obtain a good rate of exchange. I think that there's a common knowledge these days. I've been in foreign exchange for 13 years, and at the very beginning of my work with Monicorp, I spoke to lots of clients that have never heard of a foreign exchange specialist. All they use when they change their funds is their high street bank, without knowing that most of the times high street banks are not offering you a very competitive rate of exchange. In fact, a foreign exchange specialist company usually gives you 2 to 4% better rate than a high street bank. So regardless of where the rate is, there's always a bit of a saving by using a company like us rather than using your bank. Plus, we don't have any transfer fees for any payments, whereas a bank sometimes can be slightly expensive on that side. The third tip will be to get some guidance on the best way to exchange your funds. As you have seen in my example, as important as it is to get a good exchange rate, it's also important to get the timing right. The time that you're going to do your exchange will determine how much you're going to pay, and how you're going to do that exchange will also determine the end what you're going to get out of that trade. Now, I often been asked by clients, how early in this process do I need to speak with you? I haven't even found the property. And my answer is always the same. Get familiar with the rates early on the process. Make sure, especially before you travel to France, that you have spoken to someone. Ideally, you have opened an account that doesn't cost any money. So that will help you with your budget. And also, if you find the property to buy in France, you can act quickly on that. Pick up the telephone, know what the rate is. Can I still afford that property? Is there anything I can do at this stage? So I say, get early involved on the rates, familiar with the rates and with the options that you have. A foreign exchange specialist company will offer you a competitive rate of exchange, will offer you also guidance on the market and on the rates to know what the market is doing at the time, but also will offer you different ways of buying your currency. One of these ways that is quite popular with property purchases is a forward contract. The possibility of fixing a rate in advance of a payment. So for instance, Mr. and Mrs. Jones could have potentially fixed the rate of exchange at 120 when they found that property for the full purchase price ahead of completion. They would have ensured that they had a good rate and also avoid any fluctuations from the time they found the property to completion. A forward contract is usually used to have the peace of mind of knowing how much you're paying for the property, but also used to take advantage of the rate movement. So if right now we have some good news on the Brexit and suddenly the rate goes to 114, I could potentially fix the rate of exchange ahead of my payments for my property, even if they're not due right now, to make sure that I can take advantage of that. So always account for this element of foreign exchange, and it can have an impact and will determine completely the price that you are paying. Finally, I'm just going to cover briefly what is happening in the markets right now. Obviously, there's no doubt that all economies are currently under a lot of pressure due to the current pandemic. COVID-19 has had an extra layer of uncertainty and volatility in the markets, and that has made predictions and forecasting or planning actually very difficult. On the top of it, for those who are in the UK, we have an added element here with Brexit. Brexit is back on the table, and the Brexit negotiations will very much determine what rate we're going to get with the sterling against the euro in the next months to come. depending on whether we are progressing towards a deal or a no deal. In fact, right now, as we are speaking, sterling has been under a lot of pressure because there hasn't been any sign recently of the fact that we are walking towards a deal. Today is quite a crucial day because between today and tomorrow, there's a round of negotiations that could give us a little bit of a hint about where we are going. Anything that points at the direction of a deal will be supportive of the pound. Anything walking away from a deal will see the rate falling quite drastically. One of the good news here, I will say, is that experts believe that right now there is so much pressure on the European economy and on the British economy that there's probably more willingness for both sides to maybe reach some agreements on the outstanding points. So there's more possibility maybe of a deal. So we could see things progressing in a good way. And also, another element, if you are in the UK and anywhere in the world, is that we are looking, when we're looking at the rate, is how the UK economy is going to recover. How is it recovering? And again, this is a very important week. We're having a lot of economic data release between today and tomorrow. Tomorrow we have a PMIs release that is very important for us and will tell us a little bit an indication or a hint about the health of the economy right now, which again could move the rates. So for those who are looking to make a payment in a short term. You may be holding US dollars or Australian dollars. I know we have been very Brexit focused here. Please feel free to send me any questions. But just to give you a bit of a headline, the US dollar against the euro had very good levels back in March when the pandemic was at their full blast. However, since then, we've seen the US dollar losing a little bit of ground against the major currencies and against the euros. In fact, I believe this week we have hit the lowest rate since January 2019, and still the US dollar is under a lot of pressure due to the amount of COVID they have, and also US elections coming, which always creates a bit of uncertainty. So if you are holding US dollar, more than ever, please do speak to us. And if you are holding Australian dollar, curious enough, is a completely different picture. They've been having the best time of their lives. It's a great time to buy euros. They recover very well from 2019, and the fact that there is a bit of a risk back in the market is always for the Australian dollar. So still great moment for Australians to buy euros and therefore to look into that property in France. Feel free, as I said, to send any email or send any questions through this panel or through French-Entrée. If you have any questions through another currency pair or want to know more information about the currency pair or the currency you hold in your special circumstances. Finally, two thoughts. I leave you with two thoughts. Always account for the foreign exchange element. It's going to determine your purchase price. Don't leave it for the last minute. And just to finish a bit in a positive note here, we always talk about the change rate as a negative thing. It's posing a risk, the negative fluctuations, you're going to lose money. Always think that fluctuations create a risk, but also create an opportunity. So these movements could give you like an extra little bit of cash to build that swimming pool or build that extension or having a bit more money to pay for any cost involved in your move to France. And that's it for me. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm looking forward to all your questions and inquiries.
Great. Thank you very much, Mar. That's excellent. Are you ready? We've got a couple of questions. This is going to put you to the test now. Okay. So, in the context of somebody taking out a mortgage, I don't have a mortgage in place yet. Can I still, should I start looking at new transfers, or should I wait?
Well, obviously for us, it's important to know if you're buying with a mortgage or not, mainly to know what is the amount that is exposed to the foreign exchange. Obviously, if you are getting a mortgage for 85%, your exposure will be probably all on your deposit. So it will change completely the strategy that you are having in foreign exchange. Having said that, there's no way around the fact that you're going to have to pay with euros. So it's never too early to speak to us. You will have to pay your deposit if you're getting a mortgage in euros, and there's no mortgage at that stage. And always, probably Simon will cover that, thing that aside of the deposit, you will still have to pay a percentage in cash, and also cover things like the notaire. So definitely for us, it's important to speak to you. Most of our clients actually are coming at the same time that they come with Simon. They're looking for a property, for a mortgage, and at the same time they are speaking with us about foreign exchange and starting to opening an account with us at the same time.
Okay, brilliant. Somebody else has asked that they'd like to have their UK pension transferred to a French bank account. How do they make sure they get the same amount every month with all of the currency fluctuations?
That's quite interesting, because we saw in 2015 when the rate, 2016 when there was a big drop on the rate after Brexit, a lot of pensioners that were living in France and in Spain suffering massively because they were repatriating a pension, and suddenly the value of their pension had dropped due to the exchange rates. There's lots of ways to protect that value. Among them, and the most popular probably, is called a regular payment plan, which means that you can fix the rate of exchange on your pound against euros and set up a direct debit that allows you to receive every single month the same amount of euros in your French account. So you know exactly how much you're going to receive. Take into account that in these circumstances, sometimes it's not that much you are rate sensitive. You just need to have this peace of mind and knowing that that pension is protected against negative fluctuations. And also you don't have to have the hassle to have to communicate with your bank, with your English bank, or having to do a transfer every month. We'll do this for you.
Great. Excellent. Thank you very much. Couple more questions here for you before we move on to Simon. So somebody's asked, what is the cost of currency forward from pounds to euro?
Okay, so there's no cost itself on a forward contract. I think I have spoken about it in my presentation. A forward contract is the contract that allows you to fix a rate of exchange ahead of a payment. Actually, you can fix a rate of exchange ahead of up to 2 years. It's quite a long time. When we talk about costs, there's no cost per se. However, if you want to fix a rate of exchange, you need to be ready to pay 10% deposit on the amount that you are fixing. So if I am fixing a rate on £100,000, I will have to deposit £10,000 in the on your Monecorp account. That doesn't come to a cost. It's just an advance, and it's a security that you will comply with that contract when the maturity day comes. Aside of that, the forward rate is calculated in a different way. We take into account things like interest differentials, and also how long you're fixing the rate for. So you will always have to fix the rate with the help of a dealer over the telephone, and the dealer will explain to you how the rate is calculated. Again, there's absolutely no cost on it, just a 10% deposit to secure that rate. Brilliant.
Okay, and last question for you, which is sort of the doomsday scenario, is somebody saying that, you know, that they've spoken to a couple of currency brokers. They're obviously aware that they need to appreciate the rate and get the money switched. You know, to avoid a scenario where if there's a no deal, another no deal between the EU and the UK, and the risk that, you know, we go to parity or lower than parity with the pound, how does somebody protect themselves against that sort of doomsday scenario?
I think it's quite difficult. I would say it's quite a difficult call to make. I know that people sometimes come to us thinking we have like a crystal ball, but we don't. All we have is we know the different scenarios, and we take into account your special circumstances, your budget, whether you are risk averse, how much can you risk? I mean, how low can you go? How important for you is your peace of mind? But I will say in these particular cases, there is that thing that I described about the budget and the range quite work. There is always a rate below which you will not feel comfortable to go ahead. And this is what we're trying to protect. You could, in theory, put what we call a limit order. That means that you could have with your dealer that bottom line that I said, saying I cannot afford to go below one. So if the market goes there, or is hinting to go there because we don't have a no deal, please change my euros before we go below there. So there's different things we can do. There's different mechanisms that we can put in place in order to protect falling into a rate or into a margin where the client will be in a very difficult situation.
Brilliant. Okay. Yes, I appreciate that. That's a hard one to answer. And I'm shocked and disappointed you don't have a crystal ball. So
Well,
where is it? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mark. We'll probably come back to you at the end if we get some more questions related to currency.
perfect.
But thank you for your
Thank you.
session. Thank you very much. Before we move on to Simon, we are going to just put a quick poll up on the screen for you to make sure that you're awake and still with us. So we're going to ask a question, and we'll give you 30 seconds to answer the question, and then we'll share the results with you when you're done, just so we can all see how that works. In theory, you should see a poll on your screen now. The question is, what is the main reason for your property purchase in France? Obviously, you might be buying for a number of different reasons, but what's the main reason? What's the principal driver here? So is it for an investment? Is it as a permanent residence? So you're emigrating to France, or is it as a second home or a holiday home in France? So what's the main reason for your property purchase in France? Investment, permanent residence, or a second home? So as Chris Tarrant would say, press your buttons now, and we'll just give you a few more seconds, and then we will reveal the results. Okay. So you should now be seeing the results of that snap poll. A cheeky little 1% looking to buy for investment is their main reason. The clear winner is a permanent residence, so emigrating to France and living there, 71%. So nearly 3/4 of you are looking to immigrate permanently, and 28%, so just shy of a third, looking to buy a second home or holiday home. So thank you very much for taking part in the poll. There'll be a second one in a little while. And now I would like to hand over to the godfather of French mortgages, Simon Pon. So over to you, Simon.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just got the screen up, and that didn't work, did it? I don't know my screen. Oh, it is. Sorry, technical problems. Okay. Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. As probably, I've been in the industry now over 35 years, arranging mortgages for people buying properties abroad, and probably the most popular country has become France over the other competitors in the area, Spain and Portugal. And people ask me, why do people buy in France? Well, purely because of a number of reasons. Low interest rates. Rates at the moment are probably at the lowest they've ever been. We're seeing rates down for variable around about 2%, and for fixed rates around about 3%, depending on the term of the years and the loan to value. The number of areas that people can buy in France is quite large compared to other areas. And we get different types of buyers buying in Normandy and Brittany to those that buy in Douai on the Savoie or the south of France. It's not far to travel for most people, especially in Europe. I know we're talking to people around the world, but the majority of the customers I'm getting at the moment tend to be from other parts of Europe. Good rental returns in certain areas, depending on the area or where you're buying. There can be benefits if you're buying a very large property, especially that if there is a mortgage secured against the property, then it could help with reductions in wealth tax, as you only pay tax on the net. And then there's calling off periods. That's the one thing which stands out in France compared to some of the other countries. You get a calling off period when you purchase the property, and you get a calling off period when you take the mortgage out. There's not many negatives. There may be the odd legal problem that can come up, but that's common in most countries. And future potentials, what we are finding are we are getting a lot more high earners coming back into the market, purchasing, especially in the south and ski areas. And another anomaly, which is really what we can talk about later, is to do with COVID probably, is a lot of people are now looking at, as they're working remotely from home in their host country, they're looking to see if they can remotely work from home, still working for the same employer, but move to another country. And with England, a lot of people are moving to France or Spain and Portugal to work from home. So what's the current lending terms for non-residents purchasing? At the moment, the maximum loan to value is 75%. It used to be 80 to 85%, but when COVID came about, the lenders decided there was more risk in the market and reduced to 75, but we are expecting that to go back in the autumn, back up to 80%. The maximum term at the moment is 25 years, up to age 70. It can be longer, but again comes down to what pension income and what other income you can show after the normal retirement age. Minimum terms 5 years. You have to be careful with these minimum terms because one thing how they calculate how much you can borrow overseas is based on affordability. And if you shorten the term, then of course the monthly repayments will go up, and that could mean that you won't be able to get the mortgage because of costs. So trying to pay it off early may look advantageous, but it may not work out when you do the whole equation. Minimum purchase prices now at the moment are quite high in France compared to where they used to be 3 or 4 years ago. That's led by a number of reasons, because the way the economy is led because of costs, and it's very administratively burdensome for a lot of lenders to lend on the smaller ones. And if people default and don't pay that debt, to chase people for a very small loan can be very, very costly. So at the moment, but partly because of COVID, we are now seeing that the minimum purchase price is 135 and 150 for self-employed. We're hoping that will come back down in the autumn to around about 120 to 135. Minimum loans will always stay at 100, so the maximum loan will still be 80%, and 75 to 80% of the purchase price, and 120 for self-employed. Interest rates, as I mentioned earlier, are subject to a number of factors. I mentioned the rates before, but a lot of factors come into it. So it's the amount of loan, what you're purchasing, loan to value, where you're purchasing, because we do have regional lenders in France as well as national lenders, and the client's overall personal financial profile. For loans over $1 million, we do have other different terms, and we've got banks from outside France lending there, banks from Switzerland, Monaco and Luxembourg, so there is more choice. What's the most commonly asked questions for buying a mortgage, for getting a French mortgage? Well, will there be any new criteria? Well, at the moment, we're hoping that the criteria will be getting better than it has been. As I said, it has been reduced because of the problems, so hopefully that will improve. We don't. The feeling of the market is that post-Brexit, there won't be any change in lending criteria. So the loan to values and interest rates will stay the same, because at the moment, the English are not going to be treated any differently to what lending terms are on offer for somebody from, say, Scandinavia or Switzerland, who are currently outside the EU. But what may change is some of the paperwork about what could happen if you don't pay the loan. The terms there may be different, because chasing someone for a debt inside the EU will be different for someone for chasing debt for somebody outside the EU. So those sort of things, the legal terms may change, but we're not expecting the lending terms to change. What's the timescales? Well, that would depend on a lot of factors. It would depend on how quickly you put the paperwork in that the lender requests to get the mortgage. It would depend on how quickly the survey is done. It would also depend on how quickly the legal paperwork is done. But on top of that, you've also got to allow for holidays. As we know, we're coming up to a very big holiday period in August, when a lot of the lawyers and surveyors offices are shut. And often during the year, you get other regional holidays and also Christmas as well. So, but in normal times, you would expect anything between 6 and 10 weeks to get the whole thing through. But again, those factors need to be taken into account. If you put existing mortgages as penalties and I move away, how can you help? Well, at the moment, the market is tending to move towards more fixed rate products as opposed to variable, and fixed rates do have redemption penalties. The redemption penalties are 6 months interest or 3% of the loan, whichever is the higher. But at the moment, that's only caused by the market, and those penalties will have to be paid. Why is there a minimum loan value of 100 and 120 years? I explained before, this is partly due to market forces, COVID, and the economy, but also because of costs of funds and cost of administrating the lower loans. What's the 3 things I need to get ready for before I speak to a lender? Well, first of all, you're going to have the proof of income. So that could be if you're employed, salary slips, employers' references. In the UK, a copy of your P60 would be useful. proof of debt. So if you've got existing loans, mortgages, and any debt you've got, we need to show proof of that. And the proof of the deposit, the savings, where's the money coming from? One thing that's very key, and people aren't aware about this in Europe, they don't like you borrowing the deposit. So the deposit has to come from your own savings or in your own resources. If it's coming from a gift, so for example, you may be getting it from an inheritance, you've got to also show that you would have had those funds even without those inheritance. You can't just rely on that. And why should a broker use? Why should you use a broker instead of a bank? Well, because of choice, really. If you just go to one bank, you're only looking at one bank and their lending criteria. By using a broker such as ourselves, I work in conjunction with colleagues based in France as well, and they speak fluent French. So it gives us access not only to the English-speaking banks, but also to banks which only speak French. And there's a lot of advantage. And we can help you go for all the paperwork, and we sort of add as the hub with bringing everything together. So working with the notaries, the lawyers, the estate agents, and everything to bring everything together. So what other top tips should you have when you buy a property abroad? First of all, it's having a calling off period. The good thing is that when you do sign for the property, you get a calling off period. And also when you get the mortgage offer, you get a 10 to 11 day calling off period from once you've got the mortgage offer. Check what you're signing. I know it may sound quite obvious, but if you don't understand what you're signing, even if it has been translated into English, please check through your lawyer that it has been translated to what it says on the paperwork. Arranging mortgage finance in principle, it can be beneficial. We have had situations in Europe where people have bought property and some sellers are very reluctant to sell to people who are arranging a mortgage because of the time. If you can get that arranged beforehand, before you agree to the purchase, then that could put you in good stead. Arrange a mortgage in the currency where you can, in the same currency that you earn, and often in some countries there is no choice. You have to, say in France, borrow in euros, but a lot of people do rent the property and then receive that income back in local currency and offset that. Ensure you have an opt-out clause if the loan is not agreed. That's very important. And in France, you can put a clause in the sales contract to say subject to mortgage finance. And that then will cover you for three things. A, if you're turned down for the mortgage because of circumstances we don't know about at the beginning. If there's a valuation problem, or if there's a legal problem, you can get your deposit back. Very, very important. You must take independent legal and tax advice. Remember, this will be a whole change of your circumstances, so speak to your financial advisors and tax advisors wherever possible. But not only have we got lawyer contacts in France, I've also got tax experts, accountants that can help you on that way. And lastly, arrange your own survey, even if it's a new build. And the banks will do their own survey if you're arranging a mortgage, but that's normally for their own purposes. So you may, especially if it's an old property, get it surveyed. And even if it's a new property, because some new properties, although they may look nice on the top, you don't know how far down the foundations have come and what the constructions are. So it's very important that you arrange a survey. Other points to consider when buying. Property, is it legally built? Should it be there? Has it all got the right plan permissions and building licenses to get it constructed? We have had problems more, not necessarily with the building itself, but with extensions and other additional buildings on there, swimming pools and stuff like that, where they all given the right permissions. Is the property actually the right price you're paying? Is it a true discount? Look at comparables. Why is it being discounted? And ask those questions. Full title ownership. We've had situations where people have bought a property and the site only allows for 2 properties and there's 3 on there. Just small things that you would not have thought about. Again, by using the independent lawyer, they'll be able to check their paperwork. How was it built? What sort of construction? Will it stand the test of time, especially if it's an area where it's very hot? If it's been built into say a clay soil and the foundations haven't gone down enough and the material's not right, you could see heavy cracking. So again, surveyor will check those issues. Lack of amenities. What was originally purchased? When you're going to buy the property, you're originally going to go, it promised, especially on new builds, that you're going to get a hotel, a golf course, restaurants. If they weren't built, what's the compensation if that doesn't happen? If it's different to the original specifications, if you ask for a property to be built and it was supposed to have a basement or have a garage or additional costs, did you get exactly what you originally requested? The person you're buying from, the agent developer, What have they done previously? Who are they? How long have they been in business? Can we see previous properties they built? Can they refer us to previous clients, get recommendations? And lastly, location problems. Where you're buying, is it in a good area? Is it allowed to be built there? We don't get this, thankfully, in France, but we have in other countries where people have had properties built in areas such as bird sanctuaries, military zones, floodplains, and other areas. Thank you. Any questions?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Simon. There are a couple of questions that have come in, which you may or may not be able to answer, but I'll put them to you and then we can see. So one of the questions is, if I take out a UK, this is more a tax question, so you may not know the answer, but if you take out a UK mortgage on a French property, rather than a French mortgage in euros, will the interest part of the repayments still be tax deductible in the French tax system?
That is a tax question. However, at this moment in time, I'm not aware of any English banks lending in France.
No.
About 10 years ago, a lot of the banks that were lending in France, and as I've been doing this a long time now, all pulled out of the market. So people seem to have forgotten that there was another recession pre-COVID, 2008 to 10, where a lot of the banks all pulled out, and unfortunately, where they were lending in Spain, France, Portugal, Italy, no longer lending. That may be slightly different for properties where it's over 2 million. We will get out, as I said earlier, we've got outside banks then who take an interest in lending into different countries, but I'm not aware at this moment in time. I wish there was every English banks, but regarding the tax question, yeah, they should speak to a tax expert on that.
Yeah, I mean, we can put that person in touch with a tax expert. I mean, I'm pretty confident that UK interest wouldn't be tax deductible in the tax system. It's only going to be interest on French mortgages, but we can follow up.
So anything outside.
Would getting a mortgage increase the chances of getting a residency, i.e. fiduciary residency, do you think?
It's something to check with a lawyer on that one. It's different because although you've got the mortgage, you still haven't got residential status there. You would have to apply for it. Yeah, you may get sorry, as you can see, well, that's the benefit of working from home. There's a dog there. You didn't like the question, I don't think.
You didn't like the question, clearly. No, that's fine. I think it's probably unlikely, but we can get that one.
You have to check on. Sorry.
I've got a question for you that, actually there's a question here. So what about USA banks for a mortgage in France? I'm guessing that is from a
same thing
perspective.
Yeah, and there's other issues that can come into this, but again, exactly the same problem. US banks are not lending outside.
Okay, and we've got an age-related question here, which you and I have covered a couple of times before. So somebody says, we want to retire in France, live on our pension and rental property income from the UK, but it does seem to be difficult to get a mortgage in France if you're over 60.
Yeah, we can run up to age 75. But one other problem area you raised, which I didn't actually bring up in the talk, is rental income. Where it's different to in the UK, where rental income is taken into account as part of the equation to work out, in most parts of Europe, they do not take rental income into account. The exception is France, where the lender will take a view and take up to 70% of the rental income that's being received already, not the rental income you're going to be receiving from any new properties because there's no proof of record. But if you've got properties here, however, and I don't want to take up too much time, there's a distinction. If you've got 2 or 3 properties and it's not run as a proper business, then it's 70% of that income can be taken into account for France. If you've got multiple properties, so let's say you're a very expensive professional landlord and you've got 20 and you've got separate accounts and tax returns on those, then we can take all that net income into account within the whole calculation.
Great, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. I will come back to you. I'll come back to you at the end if I can, if there are any other mortgage related questions. But for now, thank you very much, Simon.
Sure.
Okay, we are coming towards the last session, which is Jane. But before we go to Jane, we've got another quick poll. So get your mouse or finger or stylus or whatever you're going to use to answer this question ready. We're going to put up a second poll on your screen here. So the second poll is launching now. So you should see this on your screen. Longer question, few more options. What is your biggest concern about buying in France before the end of the year? Is it the property? Is it mortgage? Is it currency? Are you concerned about healthcare? Are you worried about tax and personal finance? Or is there some other issue that is vexing you? So what is your biggest concern about buying in France before the end of the year? Finding the right property, getting finance, exchanging your currency, sorting out your healthcare to make sure you're covered, tax and personal finance, or an other reason. So I'll just give you a few more seconds to answer that. So I'm going to end the poll now, and I'm going to share the results, which you should now see on your screen. So interestingly, and not a little frustratingly, the miscellaneous option seems to have won. So other, 31% of you say there's some other reason that we haven't picked up on. Property at 18%, mortgage at 5%, currency at 10%, healthcare at 15%, tax and personal finance at 21%. So let's just pivot here very quickly. If you are able to type into the chat function, the chat box, if you're happy to do that, just tell us so that we can pick up at the end of the session, because it does influence our future content and how we can help you moving forwards. What is that other reason? If it's not one of those top 5 reasons, property, mortgage, currency, healthcare, or tax and personal finance, bang into the chat function now what you are concerned about, and then we can pick that up with you further down the line. But thank you very much for taking part. I'm going to stop sharing those results now. So, last but not least, we have Jane Tom from Agence Tom, who's very kindly agreed to take part in our session. Obviously, Jane is the only one of us in France, so we need to be aware that she's following all of the French guidelines around social distancing and masks. I have to say that Jane does have the best face mask I've ever seen. So Jane, if you could just show us what your mask looks like. Which I'm not entirely sure whether I'd buy a house from you, but no, that's lovely. Thank you very much for that. So I'm going to hand over you to Jane, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen now, so hopefully everybody can see what I'm doing. So rather than looking at me, even though I have a fantastic mask, this is what we're all looking for, is property. And I've just got some beautiful properties for you to look at here. Just like to say, they are all for sale with our agency. So first things first, who are we? We're Agence Tom. I'm the founder of Agence Tom. We're an independent estate agency, specialists in property sales. We don't deal with rentals. We work in the northwest of France. The agency is based in the department of La Mayenne, which is in northern Pays de la Loire. We're only 15 minutes from the Brittany border and 20 minutes from the Normandy border, so we also cover southern Normandy and parts of Brittany, including around Dinan. We're a bilingual team, good local presence. There's 10 of us working in the agency. Everybody lives and works locally. And is fully integrated into their local area, so have local knowledge to give. Traditionally, we have about 40% of our buyers are foreign, the rest French, which is fairly normal because there are obviously more French people who buy in France than foreign, but we do very much understand foreign buyers. We're also part of an international network, the Property Partners Network. There's 210 agencies throughout Europe. We're about 105 of us in France, all have a similar philosophy, way of working. We're not competitors because we're not all in the same area at all, but we share information, how we can improve everything, our service to our clients basically, and all the new latest technologies and things, so that's quite nice. So moving on, talking about buying with Brexit. getting very confused sometimes with buying versus residing. So often people, do we need to buy before the 31st of December? This year, obviously the end of the transition period, no you don't. Is anything going to change if you're, for example, you're looking to complete at the end of December and anything goes over into next year? For the purchase process, is anything going to change? And the answer really is no, nothing's going to change for purchasing a property. You can legally buy a property in France if you're not a EU resident. That's not a problem at all. So Americans, Australians can all buy property in France, and there's no concerns about that. Obviously, though, if you're looking to establish residency, you do need to do that by the 31st of December. I do have a notaire here, and it's not all notaires are the same. I have a notaire that we work with who actually will give an attestation for somebody to say that actually we are permanently residing as from today. Sometimes the mairie will do that. Not all mairies will do that. So we touched on legalities. Anybody can buy in France. You don't have to be in the European Union to purchase a property in France. There are some exceptions. Certainly if you've carried out certain crimes and have a criminal record, then you won't be able to purchase. And sometimes if you're in liquidation or something like that, you cannot purchase a property in France. Okay? So now we're talking about timescales. The exchange economics I've missed out, which is basically the exchange rate volatility, which Mars already covered. Buying timescales, how long is a piece of string? So traditionally, the buying timescale from having your offer accepted to signing the pre-sale contract, you'd be looking at about 3 weeks if you're signing with a notaire. If you're signing the pre-sale contract with an agency, it may be quicker. You can then have typically about 2.5 months between the pre-sale contract and completion. That can be speeded up. I think my best ever was 10 days from offer to completion with Christmas in the middle. So it is doable. But one of the reasons that you need to ask why a property is for sale is that, is it a succession? Is it an inheritance? Has somebody passed away? And does that inheritance need to be looked at? Because if so, that may increase the timescale. Okay. Now we've got notaires fees. People are often asking about notaires fees. I've put a question mark especially because I don't think they should be called notaires fees. I think they should be called legal fees. As you can see by my pie chart in the top right hand corner, the blue wedge is nearly 80% of these legal fees which go to the state. So they're actually taxes. The green wedge is actually the notaire's amount, which is just a little over 10%. And the red wedge is about 10%, and that's from the land registry, cadastral documents. It's all about the urbanisation documents. So as you can see, the notaire doesn't get, for calling them notaire's fees, when only 10% just over goes to the notaire. I've got here negotiation fees. Sometimes people say it's cheaper to purchase with a notaire because you don't have to pay negotiation fees. If a notaire is actually doing the negotiation for you and acting as an agent on your behalf, then yes, you do have to pay negotiation fees. Traditionally, the notaire has always had cheaper negotiation fees than agents. However, the law did change on the 26th of February 2016, whereby notaires could set their own fees, so more or less on a par with agencies now. How much are the notaire's fees? So these are the legal fees. How much legal fees are you going to pay? So for example, on a property that's 50,000 euros, you're going to pay just over 10%, so 5,210 euros. On a property that's 100,000, purchase price of 100,000 euros, it's a sliding scale, so you'll only pay 8.68%. For the mathematicians amongst us, that's 8,680 euros. For a property of 500,000 euros, it diminishes to 7.24%, which was just over 36,000. All notaire's fees, legal fees are fixed. by the government, so it doesn't matter whether you purchase with a notaire in Paris or if it's a notaire in Mayenne, it will be the same fees. Just briefly touching on agency fees, it's often bandied about, are agency fees paid by the buyer or the seller? It can be either. It depends upon the mandate that the vendor has signed with the agent to see who pays the fees, and both are absolutely legal. Now we're talking about coronavirus. Obviously, coronavirus and COVID-19 are all in our minds at the moment. Alistair's already talked about travel to and from the UK to France is absolutely fine. You have to fill in the passenger locator form, I believe, going back to the UK. But there's free travel, no restrictions. France has had a ruling in the last few days that masks must be worn in enclosed public spaces, which I believe is coming into the UK soon too. We have to wear in some outdoor spaces as well, such as outdoor markets. And I read in the news that La Rochelle is bringing in wearing face masks in certain streets and tourist areas. Social distancing, though, is the key. Barrier methods are encouraged and no mass gatherings, but there's no problem. We're all going about our daily lives quite easily, but making sure that we're wearing masks and have hand gel at the ready. We have, so for viewings, as you can see, one of my clients here on the left forgot his mask, so we can provide masks for you. But we do insist, we have a viewing charter, health charter that we send out to anybody viewing property and to our vendors as well, asking everybody to stick to that viewing charter. We'll also ask people to sign the bon de visite or the viewing agreement beforehand electronically, so that we don't have to be passing paperwork around. Just mention quickly Mayenne. It's obviously where we're based here in France, and Mayenne actually hit the BBC News back recently, saying that there was a big COVID outbreak, which is true. There are a number of cases in Mayenne now. Unfortunately, what they didn't mention is that Mayenne, the Department of Mayenne, has decided to test every single resident. So it's obligatory that we all have to be tested. So they didn't mention that, yes, they have found a lot of cases, but actually we're doing more testing than any other department. It's interesting to find that 80% of cases have actually turned out to be asymptomatic for now, which is much higher than was first thought. I have to say I still don't know anybody who has COVID, and hope it stays that way. I want to touch quickly on selling with Brexit, because are there going to be any changes, obviously, to capital gains tax? The biggest thing to note is that there was the double taxation treaty between France and the UK was established in 1963, so pre-EU, so that isn't going to change. There are exemptions to capital gains tax, such as if it's your residence, your principal residence. Now, for example, if you're resident in the UK, and you rent in the UK and you live and work and pay your taxes in the UK, and you have a holiday home in France, but it's your only house that you own, that doesn't mean it's your primary residence. And that's a pitfall that we often find. If you only obviously pay capital gains tax if you make a gain. If the property is under 15,000 euros value, then there's no capital gains. And if you've owned it for over 30 years, there's no capital gains to pay. Timescales at the moment, you've got pure capital gains is 19%, and that runs for 22 years. And then you have the social charges aspect of capital gains, which runs for 30 years. And at the moment is 7.5% for the UK. Obviously, negotiations, we don't know. Negotiations are ongoing post for Brexit, whether we can get some sort of agreement. At the moment, non-EU countries are paying 17.2%. So obviously almost a 10% increase. So that may happen, but as yet we don't know. Also, if your property value is over 150,000, non-EU countries, residents need to have a fiscal representative, and that is a cost of about 1% of the purchase price. So that may be the case as well, but as yet we don't know. Quick word about Mayenne. Mayenne is famous for probably Escape to the Chateau. which I think most people have seen. We have more inhabited chateaux in the department of Mayenne than in any other department. Low property prices, which are obviously very attractive. Heritage is important in the Mayenne. The picture on your bottom right is actually the public garden that is just outside the agency. We're in a heritage village here. The situation, we're in a strategic geographical situation in the center of the Grand Ouest, which is the big west, if you like, of France. So less than an hour from Rennes, Le Mans and Angers. So there's a lot of investment and there's a lot of industry in the area. Fibre optic is actually being put in at the moment today, in fact, outside the agency. Mayenne was the first department outside of Paris to sign up to ensure that every home has fibre optic by the end of 2021, which touches again on what Simon was saying about working from home and how a lot of people are looking at moving to France and still carrying on working remotely. Obviously with fibre optic, that makes things a lot more possible. And of course the quality of life. We have a very low crime rate, gentle pace of life, great food, often locally sourced. And anybody who's a horse lover, the emblem of Mayenne is Pegasus, so it's a horse lover's paradise. So what can I buy for 100,000? So on the left we have at 94,950 euros. This includes agency fees. You have the legal fees to pay on top. We have a detached country house needing a little bit of finishing off. It's all got first fix in a couple of rooms. First fix is done, plasterboarding's done, but it needs jointing and decorating. Has barns, 3 bedrooms, and 5,000 square meters of land. In the middle here, got an interesting complex, 84,950 euros. There's actually the house with a dormer window, which needs modernisation. The old house in the centre of the picture, which hasn't been lived in for about 50 years, so needs complete renovation. The enormous 4-storey mill to the right, with all the original mill working equipment inside it. Owns the mill stream and 9 acres around. And on the right-hand side, we've got a village house in a pretty village, completely renovated, ready to go with garden, 2 beds, 3 bathrooms for 89,950. What can you buy if your budget stretches a little bit more? So on the left, we have a 19th century gentleman's estate with a 4-bedroom house, 2-bedroom cottage in the grounds, many outbuildings, 9 acres of land around, and about 24 acres of woodland. In the middle, we have obviously an original mill. There's actually 3 properties. There's a large modern gîte on the property as well, and a smaller 1-bedroom gîte. So 3 properties on 12-acre plot with a 3-acre fishing lake, already run as a fishing business. So up and running and ready to go for just under 500,000. And then a property on the right-hand side is our Napoleon III style chateau with 10 bedrooms, plenty of original features, coach house, and 9.5 acres. So just to touch now on the most common pitfalls. Finance, I know that Simon's talked a lot about finance, but you just make sure the amount of people we have saying, this is my budget and this is what I want to do, and actually when it comes to it, they can't get the finance. So do ask about that first. This may seem obvious, France is a big place, but quite often people say I'm just up the road because I'm only a centimetre on the map, but that centimetre may mean 4 hours in the car. Always ask for a qualified professional, and just here saying that language barrier is a huge one. So does your agent speak your language? And does the agent speak the language of your country, the country that you're buying in? Because there's so much that you need to find out about. And again, Simon touched on quite a lot of it. Is there any, for example, here again, we have a picture of the public garden outside the agency, which actually looks like a lake right now in this photo, because we are in a flood zone. We're next to the river. The agency I'm sitting in right now, we're in a flood zone. Your agent should know about that, be able to tell you about that straight away. Tell you if there's a a wind farm being set up nearby, tell you if there's been any subsidence, have you got any quotes from local craftsmen? And again, if they can't speak the language, how are they going to find all this out for you? And be up to speed with any changes in the law that might affect you. So they'll know the property and they should know the area as well. You need to find out and make sure you know the costs. Again, if you've got a qualified professional, they'll be able to tell you the costs straight away. Anybody should be able to tell you how much the property taxes are, how much the notaire's fees are straight away. Also, I would always advise people to put in a written offer. If you're putting in an offer, it's been agreed. If it's in writing, all the conditions should be in the offer. So a condition such as you have a property to sell, it might be a condition that the barn you're buying needs to have outline planning permission to be able to transform into habitation. Any conditions that you have must be written in the written offer. The price, the agency fees, who's paying the agency fees, any dates, so when the pre-sale contract should be signed by, when completion should be. So all of these things, there can be less issues further down the line because everybody's in agreement at the start and everything's in writing. Obviously, we've heard from Mars, so use an FX company. I'd always advise sending money straight to the notaire. Don't ever send the money to the vendor, whatever happens. And talk about inheritance. When you're buying a property, again, if you're buying through a qualified professional, they should be able to tell you, to help you understand inheritance in France and how it works and what's the best way in which you can purchase the property for your requirements and for your family setup, and also be able to put you in touch with the notaire, who is the jurist. And that's all I have to say. So if anybody's got any questions.
Excellent, thank you, Jane. Brilliant. So I'm conscious of time. I've got a couple of questions that I'm going to throw at you, Jane. I'm also going to, for the sake of speed, unmute Simon and Mar as well, in case they want to chip in on any of these points. Everyone's being very patient and staying with us. It's now 11:10, so we'll try and bash through a couple of questions in the next 5-10 minutes and then we'll wrap up. So Jane, a question that lots of people seem to have asked, which you may or may not know the answer to, or at least have a view on. Can we obtain legal residence by renting a property before Brexit?
Yes, if you have a rental contract. I have actually been in touch about this with the consulate over here, and they've suggested that having a gîte rental isn't good enough. But if you have a long-term rental contract, then that should be fine. But that's one of the things that you can contact the British Embassy for, to check, because you don't need to own a property in France to establish residency. A rental contract should be sufficient.
Okay, excellent. That's a good one to bounce back to the embassy, because I imagine lots of people will be wanting to get themselves booked into a gîte off-peak at the end of the year for a good long-term rate, and then they may find themselves in a situation where they can't actually get the right bit of paper. So we'll put that one to the embassy. Another quick question, a very practical question. If we're coming over to France and we're determined to buy something and we're a cash buyer, what documents should we bring with us, assuming we find our dream property?
Well, my recommendation would be, I'm assuming that you're British, the person answering the question. So you need to bring all your civil status documents, which are your birth certificates, a marriage certificate if applicable, divorce certificates if applicable. If you've been divorced 6 times, you do need to bring 6 divorce certificates, because that all forms part of your civil status. If you are widowed, then again, you need to bring the death certificate with you. If you have a civil partnership, that certificate needs to be brought with you. And also, it's a good idea to bring with you proof that you have the funds. Yeah, okay, excellent. Interesting one. This has come up with me a few times, and I'm sure it's come up with you. What would be your advice to somebody wanting to buy a property virtually, so sight unseen? They don't want to come over to France and view the property because they're concerned about COVID, but they're happy to put in an offer on a property. It's not a problem at all. The last time we had an offer accepted virtually was last night. In fact, we sold 12 properties over lockdown here. with people buying virtually, and that was French, British and American. So it can be done. I would ask and see if you can do a virtual tour. There are a lot of agencies now that are bringing that in. Certainly some of our properties, you can carry out a virtual tour, and it's a guided tour. We give you a link and go through it together. Perhaps ask if you can do a WhatsApp or FaceTime tour if that's available. We sell probably at the moment about, I'd say about 20% of our properties are sold virtually. As long as you have a notaire who understands that. I've been working with a notaire now for coming up 15 years, who understands completely and is happy to do that. It just means there are a lot of Zoom meetings. It's important, obviously, to go through the contracts together, to do everything over Zoom, and also to try to view the property as best as possible. Even videos of, you know, this is me arriving at the property, I'm sweeping around looking, you know, there's not a sewage plant next door. Google's your friend here, because obviously we can do a lot of research as well, but it's all possible.
Okay, excellent. Very briefly, big picture question. Given Brexit, what do you think the impact may be on property values in France next year, from next year onwards?
I think Brexit has a very small, if negligible, impact. At the moment, the market is very buoyant. We haven't seen this for many, more than 10 years, at least. The reason being that mortgage interest rates are exceptionally low. Completed on a property yesterday, and one of their mortgages, a French couple had several mortgages, and one was at 0.4%. We see a lot of young people buying, young French who are buying, getting on the market. We are seeing now quite a lot of British buying as well, but to be fair, it's such a small part of the market that it's the French who are driving the market forces. It's not the Brits.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Simon, quick question for you, or a couple of quick questions. I'm looking to, I think this is in relation to mortgages. I'm looking to sell one property in France and buy another. My notaire, or Jane might have a view on this, my notaire has advised me that non-Europeans, so Brits from next year, will have to pay for a guarantee of funds like Americans do at the moment.
Not that we've been made aware of. No, because it's not. We haven't come across it for other markets like Scandinavians or Swiss buying there, who are again outside the EU. So I don't expect that to be a scenario. I've never had, when I've had inquiries from those type of people, being asked for guarantee of funds. Okay. Again, it could be a bit more scaremongering, which is not happening.
Okay.
I don't know what Jane thinks about that, but that's my opinion.
Okay, and very quickly on redemption penalties. So I've spoken to a few prospective buyers who've got their property on the market in the UK. It's not sold yet. They would potentially like to take out a mortgage in euros and then pay back the loan when the property sells. I think you might have mentioned this in your presentation, but can you just be quite clear with people what the potential redemption penalties might be on French mortgages if they decide
at the moment, only because they're moving more towards fixed rates rather than variable rates, and fixed rates all have a penalty of either 6 months interest or 3% of the outstanding balance, whichever is the higher. Okay, great. Mar, quick question for you. Somebody has asked, assuming that they exchange their sterling into euros to take advantage of the best rate, if it's then several months before they complete, have you got any view on what clients might typically do to make sure they can still get interest on those euros that they've exchanged into for the intervening 2 or 3 months?
Yes, unfortunately, I think, I don't know if I answered this question before, but if you change your funds and you use your MoneyCorp account to hold your euros, let's say that you don't have a bank account in France yet, or you don't want to release the funds, we'll happily hold them for you. However, we are unable to pay interest as the funds are available all the time. However, if your funds are in a place where right now they have an interest, so it's giving you some rentability, I will say don't move the funds. You could always book on a forward contract and keep your funds there. But if you change the funds and you use the facility of Monaco to hold those euros with us, which a lot of people does until they open a French account, that's against the beauty of using a service like Monaco. We cannot pay interest, so it's probably something you need to bear in mind.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Right, well, I think that at 11:20, the vast majority of people have very kindly stayed with us as we've run over. We haven't answered all the questions. There are obviously inevitably more questions than we can get to. Those questions which are related to residency or emigration, or questions which are quite specific to the person who's asked the question, we will be putting those to the British Embassy, or if after the event we can answer them ourselves, then we will come back to you. So thank you very much for all of your questions. Thank you very much to our panel for giving up their time this morning and taking part. The replay will be available and will be coming out to you shortly. Obviously, please feel free to get in touch with us here at FrenchEntrée if you'd like to have a one-to-one consultation with any of our panelists. You can either come through my colleague Peter, so that's peter@francemedia.com, or you can email me, which is Alistair, ALISTAIR, at FrenchEntrée.com, and we'll make sure that you get your questions in front of the right people. So if I can just ask my three panelists to give us a lovely wave goodbye.
Bye.
And thank you very much for your time, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.